Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, an introduction to the SBIR and STTR funding opportunities. My name is Maytal Weiss. I am a Director of Business Development at the Freemind Group and I am very happy to be giving this webinar today. It is of course coming to you live, so if you have any questions, please use your question bar at the bottom of your screen. Before we begin, I would just like to briefly talk about the Freemind Group. We are a consultant firm. We help organizations secure non-dilutive funding from U.S. sources to basically help our clients maximize their chances for success. We've been around for 17 years now, since 1999. We have 55 full-time employees, and with a pretty diverse client base, we work across the life sciences. We work with academics, university medical centers, and independent research institutes, and also the industry. Small, even virtual companies, medium-sized companies, and big pharma. And on behalf of our clients, we submit roughly 400 applications annually. And by the way, only last year, we had the chance to work on more than 130 SBIRs and STTRs. We basically help our clients identify the most relevant funding opportunities for them. We help them strategize to maximize the application's chances of success. We manage the complex project production processes and also lead the joint application writing. We, of course, can't do it alone. We do need the input of our clients. And we also support the final contract negotiation when relevant. Basically, we help them utilize non-dilutive funding as a strategic financial tool. In this webinar, we will be discussing the Small Business Innovation Research, or the SBIR, and the Small Business Technology Transfer, the STTR. We will talk about the features of both the SBIR and the STTR mechanisms, both differences and similarities. We will talk about the eligibility criteria for the SBIR and STTR applicants. We will review many SBIR and STTR funding opportunities. And we'll go over other hopefully interesting information on the SBIR and STTR mechanisms. So before we begin, I would just like to put things in perspective and talk about non-dilutive funding in general. We are talking about $50 billion that are allocated annually to fund life sciences. And by the way, the majority of that, about $30 billion, comes from within the NIH. So we'll be discussing the NIH quite a lot. If we take a look at the NIH budget for 2016, it is a bit more than $32 billion. And this is basically the pie chart of that budget. The majority of the NIH budget, by the way, goes to, and we're talking about $27 billion per year, it goes to fund R&D projects. And if we even take an even closer look at that $27 billion, this is the budget breakdown, more or less. You can see that there are a few hot topics, for example, cancer, neurosciences, and infectious diseases. But the real take-home message here is that any given research idea that you can come up with will probably be within the scope of the NIH. So remember that as you plan your research project. If we were to talk about the SBIR and STTR programs, they are both congressionally mandated set-aside programs. Since 1982, any federal agency that funds R&D with a budget of over $100 million per year has to set aside a specific amount of that budget to fund the SBIR program. Similarly, any federal agency that funds R&D projects with a budget of over $1 billion has to set aside a specific percentage for the STTR programs. The current numbers are 3.1% for the SBIR program and 0.45% for the STTR programs. These numbers actually increased during the last few years, and they are anticipated to continue on with that. They are both for domestic small business concerns, or SBCs, and before you begin writing your applications, you are very much encouraged to go into the SBC website and make sure that you are indeed eligible to submit to these programs. You do not want to start your application and find out that you basically are not eligible to submit. They will hopefully encourage you to engage in R&D. And also, another thing that's pretty special about this program, both the SBIR and the STTR programs, is that they look for the potential for commercialization, meaning they will fund also the costs that are associated with the commercialization. That is not always the case for non-dilutive funding. A lot of the times they will just look to see if they can fund your research project without the commercialization aspects of that. The mission and goals of the SBIR and STTR programs are, first of all, the mission is to support scientific excellence and technological innovation through the investment of federal research funds in critical American priorities to build a strong national economy. And a few of the goals is, first of all, to stimulate technological innovation, meet federal R&D needs, help with the commercialization of those innovations, help small businesses growth and development, and also help socially and economically disadvantaged SBCs and women-owned businesses. Some of the difference between the SBIR and STTR programs. First of all, the goal of the SBIR program is to fuel growth in the private sector and commercialization of innovations. And the STTR to stimulate the partnership of ideas and technologies between innovative SBCs and non-profit organizations, for example, typically in a university. And just about the STTR, actually what they want to do is to make sure that the good ideas flow from the academics to the industry, and actually make sure that the vision of bench to bedside is fulfilled. The requirements or the eligibility criteria of the SBIR and STTR. First of all, only U.S. small businesses are eligible and must meet all of the following. First of all, they have to be for-profit organizations. They have to be located within the U.S. And let me just add to that, all of the work conducted as a part of these projects has to be conducted within the U.S. You cannot have more than 500 employees. And you have to be at least 51% U.S. owned. And by U.S. owned, I mean you have to be controlled by one or more individuals who are citizens of the U.S. or permanent resident aliens within the U.S. And an alternative to that, by the way, is that you have to be controlled by another business that is, again, 51% U.S. owned. You can be VC backed, but if you are, you have to be backed by more than one VC. And very importantly, you must meet the eligibility criteria at the time of award. So there are, of course, a few differences. In the case of the SBIR program, the PI, the principal investigator, has to be primarily employed within the small business concern. And the regulations of that program permits and even encourages research partnerships, meaning if you see the need to add a person or some kind of expert to your team, you are very much encouraged to do so. In the case of the STTR, the primary employment of the PI is not stipulated. However, it requires the formal collaboration with a non-profit research institution. It can be a university. It does not have to be a university. And again, you must meet the eligibility criteria at the time of award. This is important, and let me just point out here that even if your PI or the PI that you're intending for this project is not primarily employed by your small business concern, or maybe you do not yet have the lab space that you will be requiring for this project, you don't have to do it, you don't have to have it now, you just need to have it once you are awarded. And also, of course, you have to be able to explain where you'll be conducting research, for example. Okay, so the SBIR and STTR programs are phase programs, meaning you have to start with the phase 1, and once you're awarded and completed the phase 1, you can then move on to the phase 2. There are a few exceptions to that, but before we start with those, let me just talk about the traditional structure of the program. So first of all, the phase 1. The goal here is to establish the technical merit, feasibility, and commercial potential for the proposed R&D efforts. The awards are for, first of all, for the SBIR. They normally do not exceed $225,000, and the project's duration is usually 6 months. For STTR, again, cannot usually exceed $225,000, and the duration of the project is usually a year. Moving on to the phase 2. The goal here is basically to continue the R&D efforts initiated within the phase 1. and the awards for both the SBIR and STTR usually do not exceed $1.5 million over the course of 2 years. Other than that, there's actually a third component here, which is the phase 2B. It is not a very new component, but it is not very known. And basically, the goal here is to make sure that you are able to complete the research plan that you had planned, and basically to give you more time to finish research and commercialize your project. Another alternative is the fast track, and this is basically a program in which you just submit the phase 1 and the phase 2 as one application that is both submitted and reviewed together. And basically, the goal here is to make sure that you can reduce or even eliminate the funding gap between the phases. And that gap is not something to just shake a stick at. It is actually something that you have to bear in mind as you plan your project. And let me just give you a short example. If you are awarded phase 1, you've done your research, you are successful, and now you want to apply to a phase 2, the time that will take for you to be awarded for the phase 2 is somewhere around 6 to 8 months. And that is only the case if you are finished and you're submitting an application and you're actually awarded the first time that you've submitted. Many times you have to resubmit. You're not always ready to devote the time to write the phase 2 application as you're going through the research. And that time frame could be very substantial as you're working on your research grant. And let me just emphasize here that this is relevant for the NIH only. And I have actually saved the best for last. This is the Direct to Phase 2 program, and this is relatively new. And basically, it allows you to receive the phase 2 award even if you did not previously receive the phase 1 award. I've told you before that in order to receive the phase 2, you have to submit and win a phase 1, but they have an exception. This is actually terrific for many of our clients, and I think it's a wonderful addition to the SBIR and STTR program. However, you must have completed some kind of an equivalent research that is equivalent to the phase 1 research, and that is also, by the way, only relevant for SBIRs. Okay, so a bit about the due dates. You are able to submit SBIR and STTRs 3 times a year. The next deadline is April 5th. After that, you have September and January. And you will be awarded roughly 6 months after you submitted the application. This is also new. The duration of the time, or the time period you had to wait, was about 8 months, and they actually made a few very nice changes to the program to just shorten that amount of time. And April actually is a pretty good deadline to submit to, because you are able to receive the award in the same fiscal year, so 2016. So bear that in mind. Another thing to remember is that there are some non-standard due dates. In some specific solicitations, you have to make sure that you see the submission due date. You do not want to start a very good application and go on with the writing process and then go on and see that you've forgotten to text the solicitation and that you've missed your deadline. So please read the solicitations carefully. I know they are very long, but make sure you go through all of the fine print. Okay. And now I would like to show you some interesting statistics, and I am actually pretty excited to be using the R&D Money View tool that we developed here at Freemind Group. It is the first of our R&D Money suite, and it basically enables you to see a very graphical and in-depth analysis of the funding landscape for awarded domestic for-profit organizations. And this is the R&D Money View. Okay, now I can see that you can see it on your screen. So first of all, our statistics here start at 2010, and since that time, $17 billion were awarded for domestic for-profit organizations. And you can have a few graphs that you can see. And before we begin looking and reviewing the SBIR and STTR program, I would just like to show you a sneak peek of what this tool is capable of. So as you can see, this is the map of the US, and this is basically a geographical distribution of the awardees. And you can scroll down, of course, you can look at the differences throughout the year. This is 2010, 2013, and this is 2015. And you can also look and see the exact amounts that were awarded in each state. And you can also move your mouse around and look at the colors. That's a personal favorite of mine, actually. For example, let's go to Maryland. You can also see the different districts within each one of the states. This is also pretty interesting. So back to the SBIR and STTR programs. I'm going back to the graphs and spending by mechanism. Okay, so if we zoom in into the research grants, for 2015, you can see that the majority of the grants, 78%, or $705 million, were awarded through the SBIR and STTR programs. By the way, there are other wonderful mechanisms out there. If I'll take a look at the non-SBIR, STTR mechanisms, you can see here the R1 and many other mechanisms. I will not go into those. We will probably have additional webinars about these, and I do not want to spoil the fun. So back to the SBIR and STTR program. By the way, if we look at the history, so first of all, at 2010, you can see that the relevant proportion of the SBIR and STTR was not as substantial as it is. You can see 2012, and this is 2015 again. And if we were to zoom in into the SBIR and STTR program, first of all, you can see that the majority of the funds, okay, $462 million were awarded through the SBIR Phase 2 program. After that, we have the SBIR Phase 1, STTR Phase 2, and STTR Phase 1. And of course, we are able to see this throughout the years. It doesn't change drastically. Just wanted to give you a short overview of those programs. And if we're talking about the funding opportunities, the different funding opportunities that are out there, we roughly divide them into two. We have the solicited applications that address a specific area of interest of the funding agency, and we have the unsolicited ones, or investigator-initiated. And basically, with an unsolicited application, you can just pitch your idea to the reviewers of the funding agency, for example, the NIH. Your application will then be reviewed by a panel of experts from your field and will hopefully be awarded by the most relevant funding agency within the NIH. And of course, just to help you understand the different scopes here. So first of all, in 2015, 12,549 awards were given. And out of those awards, 7,610 were given through unsolicited mechanisms, and that is a bit more than 60%. So remember the unsolicited mechanisms. If we talk about the SBIR and the STTR funding opportunities, first of all, we have the parent announcements. These are the unsolicited applications. So for the omnibus SBIR application, first of all, the phase 1 again is $225,000 for a project that lasts for 6 months, and for a phase 2, $1.5 million up to 2 years. The omnibus solicitation for the STTR program, $225,000 for up to a year, and in a phase 2, $1.5 million for 2 years. We also have the parent announcements that are for the fast track, and that is again only for the NIH. This is $1.5 million over the course of 2 years. And if we were to step aside from the NIH for just a minute, I would like to talk about the NSF, the National Science Foundation. They also have a terrific SBIR and STTR program. They have 2 deadlines over the year, one in June and one in December. The phase 1 is up to $150,000 over the course of 6 months, and the phase 2, $750,000 over 2 years. Basically, the scope is very similar: early stage R&D, small businesses based on innovative transformational technology with the potential for great commercial or societal benefits. And more relevant for us in the field of life science, they have a few very interesting programs. They have the advanced materials and instrumentation, the MI, the biological technologies, BT, the smart health, SH, and the biomedical technologies, the BM. If you want to find out more about these, please go into the link that I have attached here at the bottom of the screen. And just to sum up a bit about the NSF SBIR program, so the deadlines are June and December for both the SBIR and the STTR. The funding for phase 1 SBIR, $150,000 for 6 months and $750,000 for 2 years. For the STTR, phase 1, $225,000 over the course of 12 months and $750,000 over the course of 2 years. The PI, or the principal investigator, has to devote a minimum of 1 calendar month per project. And that phrase, calendar months, will probably come up a lot as you start your application writing. So I would just like to briefly explain what that is. It is basically the amount of time dedicated to working on this project. And I've just given 2 short examples. 10% over 12 months equals 1.2 calendar month, and 10% over 6 months is 0.6 calendar months. I hope that's clear. For the STTR program, a minimum of 2 calendar months is required for the PI. For the phase 1 of both the SBIR and STTR program, the goal is basically feasibility and commercialization plan. And for the phase 2, you have to start with the prototype development. And again, the fast track is not available within the NSF for both the SBIR or the STTR. And before I mention grants and contracts, so I would just like to briefly go over the difference. First of all, there are contract opportunities for the NIH and the CDC for the SBIR program. So this is just a very quick and a very quick overview of the main differences. So first of all, the scope of the proposal in the case of the grants is usually investigator defined within the mission of the NIH. For contract is usually defined by the NIH or focus. You're basically hired to complete a set of tasks. Questions during the solicitation period. So basically, and even literally, the goal of these funding agency is to give you their money. So they do encourage you to come and ask questions and ask for their advice before you begin with the application writing. In the case of grants, you may speak to any program officer that you would like to, and we actually try and utilize that approach. We find it extremely helpful. But if you're submitting a grant, you must contact the contracting officer. Due dates. So grants are submitted 3 times a year for the omnibus solicitation, and contracts are only submitted once a year. The basis of the awards for grants is basically the peer review process that we will talk about very shortly. And contracts, so first of all, you have to go through the peer review, and then you also have to negotiate the final terms with the NIH. The reporting of your activities, in the case of grants, you have to report once in a phase 1, and you have to give annual reports for phase 2. But for contracts, you have to submit monthly or quarterly progress reports. So bear that in mind as well. And I know that the contracts, the programs of the contracts do not sound extremely attractive at the moment. So let me just finish up by saying that in the case of grants, there is no money set aside for a specific research project. However, for contracts, usually they do set aside money for that. And basically, this means that even if you do not have the exact project in mind that they had in mind, if they do not have a better candidate, there is a pretty good chance that they will give you the award. That will not be the case for research grants. If you will not submit your project, they will probably give the money to someone else who has. Okay, so a bit about the solicited SBIR and STTR opportunities. There are currently, and this is true for yesterday, 88 open solicitations for the SBIR and STTR programs across the NIH. I actually found a few examples, but of course there are many. So these are just to make sure that you see how diverse it is. So you have a specific solicitation for Alzheimer's disease, another one to build 3D complex models, one to fight alcohol addiction, and even find new technologies for viral hepatitis, STTR. If you find a solicitation that is just right for you, I strongly encourage you to submit through that solicitation. But even if you don't, remember that 60% of the awards are given through unsolicited mechanisms. So it is perfectly okay, and still, please submit. And now I would just like to talk about some of the challenges through the SBIR and STTR mechanisms. So these awards are, I think they're wonderful, but they are not always very easy to get. So first of all, one of the challenges that you have to overcome is one that is specifically relevant for virtual companies. In an SBIR, phase 1, you have to perform at least 67% of the work in-house. In an SBIR phase 2, you have to conduct 50% of the work in-house, and that is pretty problematic for companies at the beginning of their R&D plan. They do a lot of outsourcing a lot of the times, and that is problematic. There are ways to justify deviations from those numbers, but you have to make sure that you do it very carefully and take that into consideration as you prepare to submit. In the STTR program, 40% has to be conducted by the company and 30% by the academic collaborator. The remaining 30% can, of course, be divided among the two, or they can be allocated to external CROs or other consultants. Another thing is that the programs are basically milestone driven. You have to build your research plan in a way that is, well, for any task that you wish to complete has to be basically has to come with quantitative measurements for success. And this is especially relevant for example, a fast track. You have to make sure that you are able to present a project that allows for a very smooth transition between the phase 1 and the phase 2. There are additional sections to an SBIR or an STTR project. For example, the commercialization plan. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of that, but that is basically a 12-page document that is full with all kinds of questions. For example, what are your goals? What are your long-term ambitions? Where you see yourself in 5 years, and other first date related questions. There are also the consortium agreement, and you will basically have to explain how you'll divide the work between the different parties of the project. And actually, the most important challenge of all is that you have to make sure that everything you write is then presented as one complete presentation. And now a bit about the NIH review process. So it is, of course, a scientific process, but there's a lot of risk management to that process as well. They basically have to assess the strength of the application and make sure that it is worth taking the risk and funding your project. And they do this through 5 review criteria process. The first one, the most important one, is the scientific approach. To win research grants, you need to have top-notch science. Unfortunately, that is not always enough. You have to make sure that you're presenting your science as the most important and significant research project there is. And of course, you know the significance of the project, but you have to remember that you're explaining the importance to, of course, experts from your field, but people who do not understand your science yet. So you have to make sure that while you're presenting the science, the scientific questions, you are able to present the significance. You also have to make sure that you're explaining the innovation in your approach. If you're presenting some kind of scientific gap, you have to be sure that you're trying to answer the question, the gap, with a very new and a very exciting way that they would like to fund. You also have to bear in mind that the scientific leadership of that project has to be able to conduct that research. You need to have a PI that is very experienced in the field. You need to have co-investigators, consultants, and anyone else that will, of course, assure the fact that your project will, of course, be successful. And last but not least, you have to make sure that the project is conducted with the most new and appropriate environment for that project. You need to have the facilities you need, the equipment, even the materials. You have to make sure that you have everything you need in order to succeed. Even if, and again, I'm getting back to the at the time of award bullet, even if you do not yet have those things, you have to plan ahead and make sure that you're able to explain where you'll be conducting your research. So what's next? First of all, the SBIR and STTR mechanisms are considered as many as to be a very good gateway for larger awards. These are, by the way, I think they're great awards, but again, you have to remember that $1 won through an SBIR, or even an SBIR phase 1, is worth more than $1. It actually comes with the recognition of the NIH or any other funding agency. It helps you present your science, your company, as one that is backed by a very large organization that is, of course, respected within the scientific community. You have to submit as many applications as you can to basically increase your likelihood of success. We usually recommend to submit no less than 3 and even up to 6 applications per year. Basically, the more you submit, the more you win. That is our motto here. And you also have to make sure that you tap additional pockets of non-dilutive money. A lot of the times we see applications or applicants that are also eligible to be funded by other funding agencies, and they basically don't apply. So make sure that you are looking through and making sure that you are submitting to basically anywhere you can. Just other examples are the R01, R21, U1, and other BAAs. And basically, to make sure that you are maximizing your chances of success, first of all, we recommend a systematic approach. Know the interests of the agency. Make sure that you're submitting to an agency that is, of course, interested in what it is you do. You have to present a complete and focused project. These mechanisms are not here to fund a company. They are basically here to fund a scientific project. You have to make sure that the project that you're presenting is complete, that it's interesting, and that is basically worth their time and money. You have to ask for what is necessary in terms of the budget. Don't inflate the budget, but don't ask for too little, because you might be considered to be not as professional as you are, or as someone who is not completely familiarized with the scope of work that they're suggesting. And also, again, leverage on research collaborations. Don't be afraid to have additional consultants on board. It will actually make your application look more professional. And another thing is that you have to target the right mechanism. So there are, of course, different pockets of money. Not all fit all. There are different sizes of awards and also, of course, different kinds of success rates. So you have to make sure that you're submitting to a place that will hopefully fund your research project. You have to conduct a thorough strategic assessment and make sure that you know what's out there before you submit. And basically, our main approach is to have a multi-submission granting strategy. If, just briefly, I would just like to explain about the professional process here in FreeMind. We basically offer 2 core services. The first one is the strategic assessment, and the second one is the project production process. So first of all, again, a long-term strategic approach. We actually find that once our clients follow that approach and submit more than 3 grants, they have a 64% chance of winning at least once. And we're pretty proud of that. That is actually the statistic for 2014. We help you outline the projects and the tasks that need to be completed. We'll link you with the existing pockets of money. We talk to program officers, get their feedback, and basically, and again, talk and browse through the solicited and unsolicited applications. And we basically map the relevant funding opportunities and come up with our multi-submission granting strategy. The second core service that we provide is the execution of that strategy, the project management and the coordination basically between the different sections you need to write, the different people that have to participate. We draft comprehensive templates for you that are based both on the solicitation guidelines and our 17 years of experience in both submitting and winning these awards. We have an ongoing feedback process, and basically this is a ping-pong process between our clients and us. We just, of course, we lead the application writing, but we can't do it alone. No one knows your research better than you do, but we basically ask you questions, insert comments, and keep sending it back to you until we feel that everything you need is indeed present within the application. We help you plan your budgets. We help you convert the information, and our final product is, of course, a single coherent presentation. And both these processes are ongoing throughout the period of time in which we work together. And basically, that's it. Don't forget about the April deadline. It is right around the corner, and you can submit with us, you can submit without us, but just make sure that you start working on your application today. And now I will see what questions you have here. Just a minute. Hold on. Okay. So first of all, I see a question about the eligibility of virtual companies. So yeah, they are eligible to participate. However, I mean, it is pretty specific. We can just talk about it once we're done. You can, by the way, contact me directly. You have all my contact information right here. Let me see what else I have. Okay, I have from John, is there a preferred amount of time for the PI to work? 25%, 90%? Usually we don't get to 90%. We see 10% up to maybe 30%. But basically you just have to write the accurate time that the PI will be investing in the process. Just a minute. Does the commercialization plan improve the chances of receiving an award, provided the plan is a sound one? Okay, so first of all, the commercialization plan is a mandatory section. It will improve your chances of winning an award because it will, of course, be present within the application. But yeah, it has to be solid. They are looking to fund companies that do have a commercialization potential. What if we're not in the US? Well, unfortunately, if you're not in the US, you are very welcome to contact me to hear about other great funding opportunities, but the SBIR and STTR programs are for US applicants only. What else? Oh, is there a link to the slide from the presentation? I am sorry, yes. You will be receiving an email with this slide deck and a recording from today's presentation. I am sorry, I forgot to mention that. Again, we'll share the slides. Let me see. Is there enough time to really submit to the April 5th deadline? Yes, actually there is. There's more than a month, and that should be quite enough time to be able to complete the application and even take care of the registration process that is not very simple, but yeah, there is definitely time. I think that is all the time that we have. So thank you very much for joining me. If you would like to hear more or learn more about the Freemind Group, please visit our website, thefreemindconsultants.com. And to keep up to date on the latest in non-dilutive funding, you're very welcome to follow us on Twitter or YouTube, and also join our LinkedIn group, which is called Non-Dilutive Funding for Life Sciences and R&D. You can find our past webinars on our YouTube channel, the Freemind Group, and I hope you found it enjoyable and educational. So thank you very much and have a great day.